second reader, finishing up the evening, is C. Rosenow. She also has a number of collections. I'm just guessing 5, maybe more. Who's counting? Again, a fistful. And in forms haiku and tanka received from Japan, but also other more extended forms, particularly in her latest book, Spectral Forms, a variety of those, particularly with an emphasis on the elusiveness and erosion, not only of relationship, subject matter of the poem, but of the forms themselves. On what led her to poetry, this came from, I think this was a Springfield reading. She said, "I think the primary reason I was drawn to poetry was a combined love of language and a realization that some kinds of knowledge and understanding are beyond the scope of language. Poetry not only accommodates those two responses to language, but embraces them." Loving the language that fails you, yeah, in a sense, and maybe loving the failure. That's instructive too. She's been very instrumental in a number of other things, and her own work, the haiku cycles, North Lake and Pacifica, Spectral Forms, those are the most recent titles. She's been an editor and publisher. Maggie mentioned that. Just This is from her press. And she started work in 1990 with Northwest Literary Reformer, Portlandia Review of Books, and in 2001 started Mountains and Rivers Press, which is ongoing. 21 titles. That's a rough count, including Pauline Peterson and Sid Corman. And with Bob Arnold, this is not from her press, but I want to hold this up as one of the very significant contribution of C's. This is a selected poems of Sid Corman, co-edited by C, the next 1,000 years, and it's a great book. If you don't know Sid Corman, take a look at that. The Exaltations, I believe, is here also, which is a Mountains and Rivers Press book. Her leadership and teaching realms are rich. She's also, like Maggie, president or former president of this time the Haiku Society of America. I don't know if the Tanka and Haiku Societies talk to each other, meet on the field of battle. 5 lines against 3, I don't know, that doesn't sound fair. She taught literature at the U of O Honors College for several years, and now at LCC, where she teaches writing, but she's presently establishing an honors program for the community college. So.
Thanks for staying. I did want to thank Scott and Tsunami for the chance to read. Like this? Better? Yeah. Better?
Yeah.
Much better. Okay. And thank Eric for the introduction. And Ingrid and Maggie and Bill. It's really lovely to read with you. And Bill, isn't this your birthday weekend?
Yeah.
And you're here.
Right.
Right, and I think that's really fantastic, so thank you for coming down from Portland, and you should be celebrating your birthday up in Portland. So I would like to start with a few haiku from Pacific, and these poems are all from moments along the Pacific coast. The book is arranged very traditionally, it's season by season, so I'm just going to read a few from each season starting with spring. A bit of sea foam in my open hands, gratitude. Spring evening, my breath rises into raindrops, for Sid Corman. In this kiss, all our other kisses, summer solstice. summer's end, blackberry juice drips from the sparrow's beak. Pulling the sand back with it, ebb tide. Grieving, waves break against the jetty. Dying fire, I sit quietly with my ghosts. Knowing the tides change by its sound, middle age. So many stars, so much I don't know, winter night. The next poems I want to read are from Spectral Forms, and that's the book that Eric's Press, Trap Rock Books, published. And I wanted to thank Eric for that and for his patience, because it is the last title from Trap Rock. And I think there was a bit of a gap between the second to the last title and the last title. And Eric is a friend and neighbor, and was just very gracious about how long it took me to get this manuscript together and to him. And so I wanted to start not with a poem from that book, but with a poem of Eric's. And there are many things about this particular poem that make me think of Eric. One is the walking, and the other is the train travel, and the sort of negotiation between life and poetry and family. And Eric and I also share an interest in Chinese poetry, and especially the Tang Dynasty poets. And so this poem he wrote after Arthur Waley's translation of Beaujou's An Early Levee, and this is An Early Leaving after Beaujou for Danielle and Chloe. At Williston, ice lacquer on snow, 7 a.m., 10 below, a few slow pickups. After leaving the warmth of the motel, I am walking to the train depot. Halfway downtown, my nostrils clamp shut. Against my forehead, the cold smacks its 2x4. I can't keep the wind at my back. I take unsteady steps over ice, my face the iron of locomotives, my gloves dividing fingers so each will freeze. Suddenly I think of Fresno, you children curled in your beds, late dreaming. In the dim yard, the grapefruit hang on the small tree, a cluster of suns. The real, big sun just about to rise, climbing the sawtooth Sierras into your valley, one of its rays about to declare your street, about to brush your eyelids awake. So Eric did mention in the introduction a little bit about form and failure, and some of you know that this project started for me as a way to explore how poetic forms fail. And I don't mean where the poet doesn't keep the meter or the rhyme, but that different poetic forms promise something to us. So an elegy promises something permanent in the face of loss, or a haiku promises to share someone else's experience of the connectedness of things and to fix a moment that's already gone. So for me, there is an inherent failure in these forms not delivering. And I think in that failure is the poetry. So I decided to explore that with this project, and what happened is it didn't work out, and so my exploration of failed form failed, and yeah, so I end up with book of poems that are more about loss and other kinds of failure, not formal failure, loss of faith and loss of love and loss of life. But I think you'll hear in the poems still these gesturing toward this exploration of form. And I'm not willing to give up on this idea yet either. I think that in the way Emily Dickinson's poems often use the failure of language as a metaphor for language, I just keep thinking that maybe the failure of form, that might be a metaphor for form. Just not in this book. The Backs of Angels. Still on the mantle, a faded blue-gray angel, specks of gold glitter clinging to her age-soft wood. Looking at her and the ornate mirror behind her, we see her entirety at every glance. The dark, worn eyes, the flat heads of nails that hold her wings in place. We have said, no God, no presence here. Hung la omnipresencia de Dios en Nuestra Señora de la Luz as artwork, even as we have a glint of awareness in steeping tea, folding sheets, weeding the chrysanthemum bed, that something about us is without a talisman. Unable to name it, we peer closely at the dusk, catching only the outline of retreat. We've left her there, reflected above the hearth, watching the color on all sides continue to fade. This next poem has references to Sappho and to Kenilworth. Sappho's work being left to us only in fragments. And Kenilworth, one of the earliest, if not the earliest, of the Anglo-Saxon poets. And the 8 poems attributed to him are attributed to him because scholars finally noticed that he had been embedding his name into each of these poems. So this is a free-verse poem, sort of looking at biological and literary lineages. On reading Sappho's lyrics. Sunday morning, I trace each line of verse with my index finger. Find myself stopping to study the crescent nail on its tip. In this small bit lies the DNA of my birth parents, the untold stories of ancestry that, if decoded, would allow narratives to emerge, unravel, collide, calling my years of authorship into question. Some histories are better left buried, with no hope of resurrection. Origins as untraceable as a missing scrap of papyrus. Information less translatable than a rune. Disguise taken a step farther, even than Kenilworth, his name hidden from all but the astute reader. His identity concealed almost as well as in a small keratin sea. My textual body, my found fragment. Summer rain. Crows bathe in it, dust dimples with it. I once ran naked through it into night surf at Monterey. The rooftop sounds repeated strikes. In this mid-year, mid-season cloudburst, I realize I'm unsure of who I am. No, only I'm not who I thought I'd be. The rain keeps falling. The neighbor's sprinkler keeps sprinkling, its programmed droplets washing away. The Shell Midden. I once heard the ocean roaring in a shell with its imaginary echoes of origin. What once inhabited that calcium cone had long since moved on, having known the salt taste of transition. And I filled the hollow space with the comfort of belief, evolved from a faith in the unseen. until the emptiness of doubt returned. Seeking assurance, I still scour the beach, but find only detritus, broken crabbacks and cracked sand dollars. Wind blows through the grass over the shell midden. Nothing left intact to hold to the ear. These next two poems are haibun, so they're a combination of prose poetry and haiku. And I'll pause briefly between to signal the shift to the haiku. This one, the reference to humanities is a reference to ancient Greek and Roman mythology. The Furies were winged female vengeance-seeking creatures, and so if someone transgressed, the Furies would go after them and extract vengeance. And when Agamemnon came home from the Trojan War and was killed by his wife and her lover, his son Orestes had to avenge his father's death, but that meant he had to kill his mother, so he was in a no-win situation. And he did avenge his father's death, and he did kill his mother and her lover, and so the Furies came after him. And he pled his case to Athena, goddess Athena, in what's considered the first trial in Western history. And she said he'd done the right thing, and she told the Furies, you will no longer be vengeance-seeking, you will be the Eumenides, and you will be forgiveness-granting creatures. Eumenides. Life filled with a sense of place, work, friends, love. But something isn't right, isn't enough, isn't finished, isn't. The river rages by. I want forgiveness for wanting more. Instead, I hear, be satisfied, be grateful. Desiring the out of reach could cost everything. White water, the fury in my heart. Souffre for my honor student. At the memorial service, your father said you were too delicate for this world, but also brave and strong. Willing to look, he said, at the darkness, willing to seek real knowledge. I learned from you. Resist fear, explore my heart, meet beauty, and beauty destroyed. Peer over the precipice, step back just in time. Wind-scoured ridge, the slash of wisdom. Dwelling elegy. This house rests below Masonic Cemetery. The ghosts of other dead flow with groundwater beneath its foundations, drift with wind currents above its shake roof. I wish we had buried you there, or scattered your ashes among the century-old stones of the hillside graves. But you are much farther away in a cemetery near our childhood home. Your soul now belongs to a society mysterious to me, as I sit in this house, reminded daily of your absence, wondering always where you have gone. The book ends with an Ars Poetica. It opens with a question, a poem I didn't read, and the poems in the book are trying to answer that question. And I think the only answer I have, even to that idea of filled form, is this poem right now. Practice. Hard rain hits the lake, leaving circles like those from a well-cast line that arcs through air before disappearing in water. I have practiced this cast for years without questioning what I want to catch or keep from this place. I know only that without it, my thoughts would scatter like waxwings, intoxicated on fermented berries. But here I am rooted among tall reeds, focused as a stone along the shore, learning the way a wave takes thought farther than a line, cast out and reeled in, the way raindrops fall into their only sound. And then I'll end with a few haiku from The Color of Water. This is the 2013 Two Autumns anthology. Haiku Poets of Northern California run Two Autumns Press, and every year they publish an anthology, and they include work by 4 haiku poets. And so I was really grateful to have work included in this year's anthology. The title is from a poem by Cioni, and so they open the anthology with Stephen Addis's translation. Young grasses, and between each blade, the color of water. A few crumbs on the tablecloth. She says maybe. Anniversary, picking more apples than our basket can hold. Another year we hadn't planned on. Wild huckleberries. Holding your memory, holding my breath. Moonrise. First snowflakes, my lips cold against the gravestone. Steady rain, my breasts hang lower. Last rays of sunlight, savoring the taste of a salmon berry. Thank you for listening.